Welcome to Cheap Controls. We make videos on things that we struggled with, hoping to help you so you don't. Consider subscribing and hitting that bell. For this video, I'm going to go over more of the basics of the twfile command. We're just going to take some characters and we're going to send them to the SD card, and then we'll read them off the SD card on the display. This is a basic flow chart of what we're going to do today. We're going to send the command itself, and then we're going to wait for a response. And we're only going to look at 3 different responses today: an invalid file name, which would be a 06, 1A, which is a general error. You get that a lot in these Nextion displays. And then the FE, which says, hey, we got the command, now we're ready for the header file, and then the data. And then if we've got everything correctly, we should send a hex FD as a response. I'm going to go over the Nextion just so you know how it's set up, but I'm not going to spend too much time on this. In the file name, we're going to show the file that we're currently reading from. I have one on the SD card that'll be default that has 4 or 5 characters, A, B, C, D, or something like that, and we'll be able to read that out. And when we read it out, we're going to read it out down here in the contents, and then up here the size of the contents of the file that we're reading out. And we'll get that when we press this get file info. If you look at the code over here, we're going to use the file stream, and we're going to populate that n0.val in the file stream.quantity, which is the length of the file that we've opened. And then we're going to read the text from 0 to that quantity and place it into the contents in that T0 down there. The video before this goes into this in a lot more detail, so you can go back to that if you want to see it. In the file browser, we'll show the files that are currently on the SD card, and then if you click on it, we're going to populate that T1 with the directory and the name. And then I'm going to have 3 buttons over here, and I'm going to have 3 different lengths of data we'll store up to the SD card. We're going to have a 5-character, a 10-character, and a 15-character readout. And I'm going to have the same command. I'm going to use the same structure I always use that C:(C) as my beginning delimiter, then the word 1, and then the value 01, and then a question mark to let the Arduino know that I'm done with the command. Now, if we're going to send 2 sets of characters, I'm going to keep the command the same. It'll be 1 again, but you can see that the value is going to be 02. And then for 3, I'm going to keep 1 again, but I'm going to send 03. And then that way I don't have to look. I can just look for 1 command. I consider doing it 1, 2, and then THR or something like that. But I just thought, just for the simplicity, that we're not focusing on sending the data back and forth. We're more focused on the twfile command. So that's really all there is to it on the Nextion. We're just going to use that to view it. I do have a camera set up, and we're going to use the real display. I had a viewer have problems that it worked fine in the virtual version or the debug version, but then it didn't work on the real display, so I thought I'd test mine with the actual display. I'm going to start with my default layout, or my default Arduino that I use for all of my videos when I'm using the Nextion. So it has some built-in stuff. I'll put a link down in the description that goes over this in a lot more detail. But what I mainly have is I set up my variables for my display. And then I have an asynchronous delay that we're going to run every second. But for this video, it's just going to flash a light on and off because it runs this tab over here, or this function. But I'm not going to use the delay at this point. I am using a nano, so I'm going to use the software serial port, or pins 2 and 3. So in the setup, I have to start my serial for both my regular serial port so that I can get some messages for debugging and just to show you what's going on in the video. And then serial 2 is going to be the port that drives the Nextion display. And then I have to do that pin mode 13 so that I can have that flashing. You won't see that in this video, but I use that just to make sure that I've got everything set up. Sometimes I'll change the duration up here in that delay length. And it just kind of lets me know that I'm communicating with the nano. Now down here in the loop, which regular viewers are pretty familiar with, I am going to delete something. And that's this area down here. Because with this, we're going to be getting a lot of messages back from the Nextion to let us know the state that we're in, that FE and FD, and even a 06 for an invalid file. So I'm going to check that over in the input. So I'm going to delete that from here and I'll add it in later over on the other tab. Now we have to add some things for the TW file. It just helps if you have some of this set in a variable so you can just call it. And we'll have this header and this 12-byte character array that we send every time that we send the command to the Nextion from the Arduino. And the first 7 bytes of the header will always be the same. The last 5 bytes are the ones that we alter for the command and make it unique to whatever packet we're sending. And for this example, for the file data, I'm just using that as a random variable. I'm going to send 5 bytes, and it's the ASCII code for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So every time we write to it, we're going to send 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to send that either 1 time, 2 times, or 3 times. So we'll just get a copy of that over and over. And then so I know how many times I'm going to be sending it, I have another variable called send times. And that's going to equate to that command, that 1 that we send back from the Nextion. And that's all we have to do to this first tab. And this code is available up on the Cheap Controls website if you want to download it. I believe everything else we're going to do is going to be on this Input tab. And this is where I collect the data. And this is where it might be good for you to go back and watch a video on how I do this. Because I use that C:(C) as my delimiter to let them know that I have a command, or to let the Arduino know that I have a command coming in from the Nextion. And then based after that C:(C), my commands are all 3 characters. 3 characters for my command has been working out well. And then the length of the value can be any length. And then we're just looking for that question mark to finish out the command. And I always start with this testing one in here, just in case I want to verify some things. I'll send the command cmd, and then I'll just throw a random value in there and make sure that I'm getting the data through that I want. So we're going to change that right away to 1. So now, if the command is equal to 1, we're going to set that send times to the value. Now the value comes through as a string, so we have to convert that to an int. And I have that set as 0, 1, 0, 2, and 0, 3. So it'll set that send times equal to 1, 2, or 3, depending upon which button we push on the Nextion. And then I'm going to do a message out the serial port that just send the text to the Nextion, and then how many times. And that's just that send times variable. And this is where we use the command. So we're going to serial to print. We're going to send this to the Nextion, so we use serial to. And notice that I don't have the print line. You don't want to end it with that carriage return and line feed. We're going to send the command twfile. Then we have to include the quotes. So I have to do a \quote. So we escape sequence out the quotes and make sure a quote is included in the string. And then we're going to write this to SD0, which is the SD card that I've inserted. We're going to call it fs.text. That's for file stream. I took that from the last video. And then you need a comma, and then we need the length of what we're going to send to it. And we've got that send times value, but we're going to send 5 characters every time for every send times we have. So let's multiply that times 5, and then we have to end it with the end character. And then after we send that, we need to wait. So we'll send that up. The Nextion needs a little bit of time to create the file on the SD card and then send us a message back in FE that says, hey, I'm all ready for you. And then those commands will always be 4 characters long. So we have to alter something up at the top. So this line up here, I'm going to change it to greater than 4. So that way, I'm going to be looking for 2 different kinds of strings. I'm going to look for my C:(C), which would have to be greater than 4. And then I'm also going to look for string lengths that are equal to 4. So if my DFD, if my length approaches 4, and the last 3 characters are those 0FFs, because that's the way the Nextion is going to send the command back, it will end it with 3 FFs. Then I'm going to do something or check and see if I've got the commands that I want. And then if I do, I'm going to want to reset that DFD back to empty. When we're checking for this length of 4, we're going to look for a couple different things, but we'll start with that FE. If we get the FE, then that means the Nextion is ready to receive the data. In other words, it's got the file name, that fs.txt, all set up, and it's looking for data. It's also looking for a certain length of data, and that's the 5, the 10, or the 15 bytes. So once again, I'm going to print out on the serial monitor just something that says, hey, I got the FE, the file's created, and it's time to load the data. And then after that, I'm going to load that data into the header, or I'm going to load the value into the header. So I've copied the header again as I have it on the front page or on the main page. And so the first 7 bytes are set. And then after that, the 00 is the CRC bit, which we don't have to worry about. The next 2 would define it if we had multiple packets. In this case, we're only going to send 1 set of data to the Nextion. We'll get into that in a later video. And the last 2 bits will show the length, and it's set up a little bit different. There's big endian and little endian, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. But for our case, we're going to use little endian, which means we're going to have the least significant bit first, and then the most significant bit second. But depending on the version of the IDE you're using, you may have to reverse those. Now, if the editor can, go ahead and put up a little graphic that shows which IDE, where it's switched at. And then I use these next 2 lines to load the data into those bytes. So I take that send times 5 and I AND it with 255 and I load that into the 10th bit, or the least significant. And then I move it over 8 bits, or I binary shift it. So I'll drop off 8. And in this case, it's going to be 0 because the value would have to be higher than 15, or higher than what we're going to get to use the most significant bits. In the next video, hopefully I'll get into that and you'll see what I'm talking about. And then we're going to send the header itself. So we've got it all set. We've got the values that we need. And then we're going to use the H variable for header. And we're just going to go through those 12 bytes and send them one at a time. We're going to go ahead and send them out the serial port so we can see them on the monitor. And then we're going to send them up to the Nextion display. And then finally, we're going to send the bytes themselves. So we're going to use the X variable for the number of times, 1, 2, or 3. And then we're going to use the Y variable to send the 5 different bytes. We'll send those 5 bytes once, twice, or 3 times. And then we should get an FD as a response if it's successful. The FD message should come back from the Nextion. So we can just add it in here. It'll be followed by those 3 FFs. So if we get that, then we're just going to print a message that says file received correctly, and then we should be able to view it on the Nextion display itself. Now there are some error states we need to check for, and we'll do those at the top. Now it doesn't matter if you put this at the top or the bottom, but it does have to go between the if DFD length equals 4 in that if statement. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for that 06. And if we get a 06 back, then that means that the file name was improperly put, like we have the wrong SD or the backslash wrong or something. And then the other state I like to look for is just what I call a general error. It's that 0 times 1A, or that hex 1A, which is the same as a hex or as a decimal 26. I like to look for that. That way I know if I've got an error or not. And sometimes it's just a general error. I've got the command wrong or something. And that really should be it. I'm going to upload this to the Arduino. Then I'm going to switch the camera on. And I'll have the serial monitor going. And hopefully we can see this function. And what I have first is I have this test.txt file on there. When I select it, you can see that it displays up in that sd0./test.txt. And now I'll get the file information. And you can see it's 5 characters long, and the code is A, B, C, D, and E. Now I'm going to press the 1 button, and it should create a file in that small window. Now it won't display until we refresh the page. And you can see too that we've got a general error there. So something didn't quite work. I'm going to press it again. And this time it went just fine. But you can see that it's not showing up on the display. I'm going to reset the display. And now you can see that it's there. Now I'm going to select it. And I'm going to hit the Get File Information. And you can see we have 5. Now I'll press 2. And you can see that we got the file received correctly. And now when we press Get File Information, we should see 10, and it should count to 5 twice. Now we'll do 3. And so you can see it works pretty well. So now, though, I want to show you some error states. So we're going to go back to the Arduino. So now instead of using the twfile command, we're going to use this. We're going to write text to the N0, which you can't do. It needs to be a value, not an ASCII. And it's not going to matter which button we press. We should get this no matter what. And you can see that it's an invalid variable. So it's just more of a general error. It's just we have garbage in there. And so the next test we'll do is we'll try and get that 06. We'll have the wrong file name. So for this, we're still going to use the twfile command, but instead of an SD, I've got yo-yo in there. So I know it's not going to recognize that as a location. And you can see now we get that 06 invalid file name. So it works pretty well, and you can check for multiple errors. Like I said, there are some other states we'll check for in the next video. So now I'm going to show you how to update the file browser automatically. So what I'm going to do in order to refresh that and show that that file is there, that fs.txt, is I'm going to add a couple of lines after the file is received correctly. And so I'm going to delay 100 milliseconds. I don't know if I really need that or not. And then I'm going to serial print line page 0. So that's the only page that's on this display. So what it's going to do is it's just going to refresh the page. There's probably a better way to do this, and I'm going to look into it over the next week or two while I make the next video and see if I can come up with a better way. But for right now, this seemed pretty quick and easy, and I just read the comment today, so I wanted to throw something in there about this. I'm going to upload this and I'll show you that it works. And you can see that we're back to just that test.txt. And we can read that 5 characters. You can see that the fs.txt isn't there. So when I press 1, we should get it. Of course, if it works. It looks like I didn't set the file name back. Let's go back to the Arduino real quick. And you can see I never did set it back. I guess I got too excited about finishing the video. So I'm going to reset this back to the right thing. So now I'll upload this and we should be good. Okay, I'll try and press it again. And you can see that the fs.txt came in. And now we should be able to read them. And you can see that it works. And if I run it again, or if I press another button, it'll refresh the page again. You can see that it didn't complete, so we'll push it again. But since I am refreshing the page, you can see that the file name popped up. So we'll have to press that fs.txt and then hit it. But you could set that to global, and then that would take care of that problem if you wanted to maintain that. But it might not be the worst thing to not have that in there. Because if you do change it and it goes away and you hit file content or get file content, it doesn't break anything, it doesn't hurt anything, it just doesn't work. So now I'll recap. So everything we did took place in the input tab, and I just look for that C:C, the generic commands that I have set up for cheap controls to read from the Nextion. And if I see 1, then I know to send that twfile command. And then once I send the twfile command, I can't send the header and information right away. We have to then wait for the FE to come back from the Nextion Display. When we get the FE back, then we can send the header file, which we have to insert the length again. So you have to do the length twice. So you do the length in the twfile command, and then you do it again in the header string. And then after that, you can send the data itself. Then once you've sent the data itself, then you wait for the FD. You actually don't have to wait for the FD, but you should get an FD to let you know that the data is sent correctly. And you could see in our example, it didn't always work. So it's kind of nice to have that feedback. And then the two error states you should be looking for are 06, which would be an invalid file name, and then that 1A, or the decimal 26, which just says you got a bad command. And then you could, if you got that, there's nothing to stop us from having another text or a colored LED or something on the Nextion Display to let us know what the error was. Now I'm going to take the same code, at least I think I'm going to take the same code, and build upon it for the next video. And in that case, we're going to add some more things. And you'll also understand why you have to have the size in both the TW file and in the header. Hopefully that becomes clear over the next couple videos. Well, that's about it for this video. If you like what you saw, consider giving me a thumbs up, and also consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.